up a ton of different things that I think are impacted by two committees, more so than any other committees. The first is the Education Committee, and the second is the Appropriations Committee, where all the money gets decided for the state of Arizona. So you've now served on these committees for a couple of years. So, what are some of the big things that you've seen this session that are talking about the issues, or what haven't we seen? Because I think that's also an important question. That what are we missing? What are the bills and the policies that aren't moving through that would impact whether it's housing affordability, cost of living, or education?
Great question. So I kind of look back over some of my notes because we dealt with a lot of things in education and appropriation. I'm really honored to sit on both of those committees because they cut right to the chase
Yeah.
for what the legislature should be prioritizing. So I'll take education first. One of the things that has really discouraged me over the 4 years that I've served on that committee is that it's very rare for any bill from a Democrat to even be heard in the committee. This year, for example, I think there are only 4 Democratic bills that were heard out of some 40 or so bills total. So
Wow.
what we did not hear were bills that would ensure that schools that receive taxpayer dollars in the form of universal ESA vouchers have any kind of a guardrail to make sure that students are safe and that taxpayers, frankly, know how our taxes are being spent. There are no guardrails and no bills were allowed to be heard in that committee about those issues. We also didn't hear a bill that I'm particularly passionate about that I've run for the last few years, and that's a school mental health professionals academy.
Mm.
What we know in recent years is that more and more students are having mental health challenges and anxiety and depression, and we've seen an increase in suicide. And yet Arizona continues to be at the bottom of the nation and how much we and how well we fund our mental health services on campuses.
Right.
We have one of the worst student to counselor ratios in the nation. So my proposal has been, let's create like the Teachers Academy, let's create a school mental health professionals academy so that we can increase the pipeline of people who are interested in coming into our schools to serve in those really, really important ways. But once again, that bill was not ever put in on even on an agenda in the committee. Several Democratic members had bills that would prevent ESA voucher money for schools, excuse me, that would prevent schools that receive ESA voucher money from just being allowed to raise their tuition because they knew families were now getting this government money. There were
Right.
other bills like that as well. For years, our ranking member, Rep Pollock, has tried to fund full-day kindergarten, and she did again this year. That was not heard. Most schools offer full-day kindergarten, but they have to rob Peter to pay Paul because uh, it's not
They
funded.
only get half the amount of money. I was on a school board for 8 years, and I was shocked that we were having full day kindergarten, and yet we were having to take money from other parts of the district to be able to pay for it because they only counted as half a student or half of the ADM.
Exactly. Thank you for clarifying that. And then another thing that we've been trying to do for years is to revise the outdated aggregate expenditure limit, which was formulated and set in 1980. And every year for the last few years, school districts have exceeded that limit. And of course, they've exceeded the limit. Education looks a
Yeah.
lot different in 2024 than it did in 1980. We use computers and not
Right.
chalkboards, you know, computer projectors instead of overhead projectors. And we should be using those things. But instead, the one-seat majority uses that aggregate expenditure limit every year as a way to say, oh, look, our schools are overspending. They're not
Right.
overspending. As a matter of fact, they're not even allowed to spend the amount of money that the legislature appropriates to them.